Paul continues and he says, you must no longer be a water drinker, or don't any longer only drink water, but on the contrary, Timothy, you must use a little wine. Make use of a small amount of wine, which is the juice of fermented grapes, as needed, which obviously is not against being pure. Paul had just written that Timothy was to keep himself pure, but he also tells him that he must use a little wine, make use of a small amount of wine, for the following specific purpose: because of your stomach and your frequent weaknesses. So Paul was aware of Timothy's health, and he needed a little bit of wine on account of his digestion and his frequent infirmities. In other words, when Timothy lacked strength, when he was lacking physical strength, which happened to him evidently at intervals. In verse 24, Paul continues and he says, the sins of some men are very clear, leading forth into judgment. So the sins that some people commit against God are plain to see in front of you, Timothy. They are evident that they are sins before or in advance of you having to examine them closely. The sins are obviously sins, and they're preceding the men, going before them as though they were leading the men, showing the way to go. And where were they going? Into judgment, into receiving the consequences of God's decision about their committing those sins. But then also follow on some people. So the sins follow on or have the same road or way, going in a particular manner. How? After some people, whereby Timothy would know their behavior as being sinful by observing the people's behavior. He would examine that and test their behavior, and he would see that they were committing sins against God after those sins were committed. Paul then writes that in the same manner also the works, emphatically and specifically the beautiful works. The beautiful works are very clear. The works that manifested decorous, harmonious, and acceptable goodness to God, as we saw in verse 10, are plain to see in front of you. Timothy would see them. They will be evident to you, Timothy, before or in advance of you having to do a lot of examination and testing, observing those who would perform those beautiful works. And the works having otherwise are not able to be hidden. The works described as having or holding another way and being of the same kind and sort are not capable. They don't have the able power to be concealed. Timothy, you will be able to recognize them, whether you see it beforehand, before the people actually perform those works, or afterwards, after the people have performed those works. Paul is encouraging Timothy so that he has the ability to know when people are behaving in a right manner according to God and God's word, and when people are not behaving correctly. How tremendous this teaching is from Paul to Timothy, and we can also learn regarding how we too should behave ourselves among holy people in the church.